I knew things were shifting the moment Trevor dropped the word synergy unironically during his first all-hands meeting. That arrogant three-piece suit-wearing MBA dropout came strutting in like he just invented business, not inherited a corner office from the man who used to call me the backbone of this place. I've seen corporate climbers come and go, but this one had the confidence of someone who never had to earn his parking spot. 19 years. That's how long I'd been with Blackstone Dynamics. I joined back when our servers were held together with cable ties and prayer, and our marketing team was just whoever could make a decent slide deck. I was there before we got the venture capital, before we outgrew 3 office buildings, and long before anyone had ever heard of Trevor with his fake humility. The founder, Mr. Blackstone himself, Robert, built this company from a card table in a rented garage. He used to say, "Patricia, systems create stability," and I made sure every system had documentation, timestamps, and backups. When you've been somewhere long enough, you stop needing a title to know your value. Technically, I was Executive Operations Director, whatever that meant to outsiders. Internally, I was the person you called when purchasing stalled, audits panicked, or legal forgot which version of the bylaws we were using. I kept the whole machine running without ever needing to raise my voice. Then Robert got sick. He started declining about 18 months ago. Quietly at first, missed calls, forgotten details, long pauses. He still had clear moments, but the board got nervous. And nervous boards make terrible decisions, like handing control to Trevor, Robert's entitled nephew, who once asked if we could just automate compliance reports with chatbots. I wish I were making this up. From the second Trevor set foot in the office with his designer shoes and practice speeches, I knew I had a countdown timer over my head. He made presentations about modernizing legacy processes while never once looking me in the eye. His eyes, for the record, were usually glued to his tablet, scrolling through whatever crypto influencer was promising to revolutionize his ego. I started noticing changes. My calendar access got mysteriously limited. People I'd trained were suddenly copying me instead of including me, and I overheard him in the hallway telling HR I had outdated energy. Here's the thing about being underestimated. It gives you time. Quiet time. The kind where you revisit old contracts, pull up those dusty files nobody's opened since 2011, and remember every handshake that ever mattered. Robert and I had an understanding. He trusted me to protect the company's foundation, and buried in those foundations were some very old, very real clauses with very sharp teeth. But hey, before I go full nuclear real quick, if you're listening to this and haven't subscribed or hit the like button yet, now's your moment. 90% of folks just consume these stories like popcorn without showing support. But every like and subscription keeps this little engine running, and it means everything to the team working behind the scenes. Now, back to Trevor's slow-motion disaster. I didn't fight the changes. I let him replace our vendor coordinator with his fraternity brother from Delta Tau. I watched him convert our internal database into a Slack channel called Trevor's Think Tank. I even smiled when he rolled out Casual Shirt Thursdays, like it was a groundbreaking innovation. But what I also did was quietly renew my notary certification, dust off a certain 22-page document signed by Robert in 2011, and begin logging every interaction with HR into a private email thread titled, "When this fool fires me." I knew the final blow would come suddenly. Trevor didn't have the spine for direct confrontation. He was more the schedule a meeting at 7:45 a.m. and bring pastries like a sociopath type. So I waited. And while I waited, I made absolutely sure every piece of paperwork he'd never read was in perfect order. Every clause he would have dismissed had been verified. Every signature was notarized. I wasn't planning revenge. I was preserving structure. The structure he was too arrogant to understand. Because here's what Trevor never learned in business school, or at least not between keg parties and motivational seminars. The person who understands the foundation holds the power to shake the entire building, and I was about to shake it. It happened at 8:03 a.m. on a Wednesday because of course it did. Only a coward picks a time before most people have even poured their first cup of coffee. I was still locking my car in the parking garage when I saw the meeting invite appear. Subject line, quick chat. Location, HR conference room. C, sent at 7:59. No context, no preparation, just vibes. Trevor was already there when I walked in, legs crossed, sipping some green smoothie from a branded tumbler like he'd just emerged from a wellness retreat in Silicon Valley. HR director Amanda sat beside him like a hostage, pretending her makeup could hide the dread in her eyes. I gave her a nod. She didn't return it. He didn't waste time. "Patricia," he said, like the name left a bad taste in his mouth. "We've been evaluating our organizational strategy, and after extensive deliberation, he actually smiled here, the bastard. We've decided to sunset your role as part of our modernization initiative." "Sunset," he said, like I was a failed marketing campaign. I blinked once. That was it. No tears, no gasps. I just tilted my head the way you do when a child proudly shows you a drawing of a dinosaur that's clearly just a scribble with dots. I didn't need to hear the rest, but he gave it anyway. "We really appreciate your historical contributions," he added, dragging out the word historical like I was an artifact he'd found in a storage room. "It's crucial to stay competitive in today's landscape." That last line, that was the gift. The phrase that told me everything I needed to know. He wasn't just cutting excess weight. He thought this was a teaching moment. "Consider this your final lesson," he said, like he was the mentor in a startup-themed action movie. I smiled, tight-lipped, no teeth, no words, just nodded once and stood, picked up my purse. Didn't even bother taking the coffee mug I just set down. The walk out felt like the longest, slowest march I'd ever made, except no one applauded. They just avoided eye contact like I had become contagious. The elevator ride down was mercifully empty. My hands were steady. My heart wasn't. I got into my car, shut the door, and screamed. Not loud, not primal. Just one short guttural release like letting pressure out of a damaged valve. Then I opened my banking app, deposited my final paycheck. Trevor had it ready, smug little overachiever, and clicked confirm. That timestamp mattered. Next stop, Notary Public. I had the letter already printed, sealed, and labeled for Board Legal Counsel immediate review. All it needed was the official seal. The notary raised an eyebrow when she read the first line but didn't ask questions. Just signed, stamped, and slid it back. Then came the courier. I'd prepaid the same-day service 3 weeks ago, labeled time-sensitive legal document. The driver asked if it needed a signature on delivery. I told him yes, but only from the company's general counsel. Not HR, not Trevor, no substitutes. He left and I sat back in my car, parked outside the coffee shop across the street from the office. I didn't go home. I watched. Through the tinted windows, I saw Trevor leave the building 2 hours later, laughing with someone from marketing. Probably the same fraternity brother he hired to run analytics, despite thinking a Gantt chart was a type of beer. What Trevor didn't know was that the letter now in transit contained more than just polite goodbyes or legal complaints. It was a formal notice of termination acknowledgement, executed by the party of the second part, me per Section 5.7 of the 2011 Operational Reversion Agreement. A clause so old, even most of legal forgot it existed. But I hadn't. I helped Robert draft that agreement when we incorporated in Delaware. He was paranoid back then, terrified the board might someday be swayed by family connections instead of competence. So we wrote safeguards, legal tripwires, checks buried so deep they might as well have been written in invisible ink. But I kept copies, in triplicate, stored in 3 locations, encrypted in 2. That clause stated that if I were ever terminated without full board approval and severance in compliance with original charter terms, operational control of Blackstone Dynamics would revert within 72 hours to the founder's trust and to the appointee listed therein. Trevor had just pulled the pin on his own grenade. And the best part? He still thought I was just historical. Trevor posted a GIF of a broom sweeping in the executive Slack channel with the caption, "Spring cleaning time," Out with the old. Someone reacted with a fire emoji. Another added the little clapping hands. I know this because someone forwarded me the thread. They shouldn't have, but they did. Loyalty's a funny thing. It doesn't always fade just because you're no longer on payroll. From his corner office, which, for the record, used to be a supply closet until Trevor had it remodeled with minimalist productivity vibes, he strutted around like someone who'd just slayed a dragon, not pushed out the one person keeping his feet out of legal quicksand. He ordered catered lunch for the executive team that day, sushi bowls and craft sodas, celebrated my graceful exit with a toast about removing legacy friction. I'm told he even pitched a new org chart titled The Innovation Forward, printed in some trendy font, like that was supposed to mean something. I wasn't surprised. Trevor had all the emotional depth of a damp napkin. What I was counting on was his arrogance, the same arrogance that made him shrug off the legal memo his assistant slid under his protein shake that afternoon. I imagine it went something like this. Hey, legal flagged something in the old governance archives about Patricia's termination. They said it might warrant review. Trevor probably waved it off between sips of his kale smoothie. We eliminated that clause years ago. Let compliance chase their tails if they want. But we hadn't, because I hadn't let them. Every 4 years, like clockwork during compliance audits, I ensured the reversion clause stayed active, recertified, renotarized, and I had the digital trail to prove it. Most of the current team wasn't around in 2011. They didn't know the founders' paranoia ran deep. They didn't know that I was the one who helped design that clause, back when we both believed Blackstone needed permanent safeguards from exactly what Trevor had become. It wasn't revenge. Not really. It was just continuity. Meanwhile, the courier was halfway across the city, tracking GPS signals as he navigated through traffic. The envelope in his bag bore my seal, the same one Robert and I used back when we filed our first incorporation paperwork with Delaware. Inside, the notarized execution notice cross-referenced with board charter documents and a copy of Robert's trust appointment directive, dated, signed, filed with the state, unaltered. The language was precise. In the event that Patricia M. Hawthorne is involuntarily terminated without documented cause, and if said termination fails to meet the severance and board notification standards outlined in Article 8.3, then operational oversight shall revert to the founder's trust. Control shall transfer to the trust's appointed successor within 72 business hours of executed notice, barring direct board intervention with unanimous override, which shall require the founder's written consent. They had no override, and Robert hadn't signed anything in over 11 months. Trevor didn't know the clock was ticking. He didn't know the courier was 4 blocks away when he posted a video of himself on the office balcony with the caption, "Making room for innovation. Let's go." Didn't know that legal was already calling in a paralegal to dig through the archived governance binders. The physical ones no one ever looked at unless I asked them to. Back at home, I didn't celebrate. I didn't pour wine. I pulled out a yellow legal pad and wrote out a timeline. Old school, 8:03 a.m. termination, 9:15 a.m. notary seal affixed, 9:37 a.m. courier dispatched. By 1:21 p.m., it was marked as delivered and signed for by Blackstone Dynamics General Counsel, Sarah Montenegro. I had a paper trail, timestamps, emails, tracking confirmations, even a recorded voicemail to my personal attorney noting the event, all within the window. That evening, I received a single-line email from Sarah. Please confirm whether you've executed the reversion clause as outlined in Article 5.7. I replied, executed, timestamped, and delivered as required, effective as of today. I signed it best regards because I'm a professional. Then I sat back, opened a pack of crackers, and watched the Slack notifications pile up on my backup phone. The whispers had begun, not panic yet, but it would come. They just didn't know it was already too late. The thing about watching a building collapse from the outside is it's quieter than you'd expect. No dramatic explosion, no sirens. Just little cracks spreading through the foundation while everyone inside keeps sipping their craft sodas and pretending nothing's wrong. By Friday, 3 days post-termination, Trevor had already fired 4 other senior staffers. All of them had been with Blackstone since the early growth years. Our vice president of client relations? Gone. Systems integration manager? Out. The woman who built our training framework from scratch while caring for elderly parents reassigned. That one hit me harder than I expected. Her name was Diane. She brought me tea during flu season in 2018. Now she was escorted out without a goodbye email. In their place, fraternity brothers. Literal fraternity brothers. His old college roommate, Jake, who once got suspended for hosting a beer pong tournament in the library, was now our new chief innovation architect. No background in technology. No background in anything unless you count motivational cryptocurrency posts on social media. Another buddy named Chad was installed as head of organizational dynamics. I swear that was his actual title. Organizational dynamics. Inside sources, meaning a few brave souls who still had me on their personal WhatsApp, sent me screenshots of Trevor's morning motivational posts. Legacy doesn't equal loyalty, he wrote on Thursday. We're building a future, not worshiping a past. Keep your energy positive, your ideas disruptive. Someone else captioned one of his videos with, "This is what happens when a LinkedIn post grows legs and walks into your office." I nearly choked on my coffee. From my little home office, nothing fancy, just a corner desk and a window view, I sipped my dark roast and watched the Slack leaks roll in like postcards from a ship headed straight for the iceberg. Someone sent me a spreadsheet, projected revenue for the first quarter. It had my formulas, my color coding, my notes in the margins still intact. Trevor had replaced the header with a banner labeled "Optimized by Trevor." That man couldn't format a cell if you paid him in Bitcoin. Then came the HR fumble. Late Friday afternoon, I got a weird alert. My online access to the company's internal HR portal briefly reactivated. Not full access, just a window, long enough for me to glimpse a modified file. The official termination notice. Dated Friday. 3 full days after Trevor gave me the boot in person. They were trying to backdate the event, maybe to buy time, maybe to shift the 72-hour reversion clause trigger. Amateurs. Here's the problem with rewriting history when the historian kept receipts. I had my timestamp, direct deposit, the notarized courier slip, the signed delivery confirmation, and my legal reply all dated Wednesday. I forwarded everything to my attorney. She replied with a 2-word email, "Let them." By Friday night, word was spreading inside Blackstone. Nothing loud, just whispers. Someone from product messaged my old assistant asking if she had a copy of the founder's charter. Another from legal called in, sick pending document clarification. One particularly brave IT analyst apparently told Chad the vibes were concerning after being asked to sign off on some half-baked platform migration. That night, I got an email from an anonymous encrypted account. Subject line, "He's bragging about replacing you with automation." Inside was a screenshot from a company-wide Slack where Trevor said, "Honestly, Patricia's whole job could have been done by a decent software plugin. We're future-proofing now." No one responded to the message, just a string of wide-eyed emojis. I didn't reply to the encrypted email. I just saved the image to a folder called Ignition Files. The folder also contained a copy of the reversion clause, an audio recording of Robert discussing succession planning, and one glorious video of Trevor pronouncing fiduciary as fee-do-sherry during an onboarding Zoom. By Sunday, I knew the countdown was entering its final phase. Trevor didn't. He was too busy planning a company-wide rebrand. The theme, new blood, no baggage. That tagline wouldn't age well, but it'd look real nice printed across his exit paperwork. The Monday board meeting was supposed to be routine. A quick check-in, a few Q4 slide decks, some half-baked performance metrics from the new Dynamics team Trevor invented out of thin air. The kind of meeting where everyone politely nods while secretly checking sports scores under the table. Instead, it turned into the slow, audible sound of ice cracking beneath thin corporate shoes. It started innocently enough. Trevor kicked things off with a standing presentation, literally standing, as if looming made his Q3 decline look intentional. He wore a quarter-zip pullover and khakis, like he thought he was the second coming of a tech visionary, minus the intellect or even the courtesy of deodorant. "Team," he said, pacing slowly. "We're shaking things up. No more institutional drag. No more legacy quicksand. We are Blackstone 2.0. The board members smiled thinly, the way you do when a server insists on describing the specials in excruciating detail. Sarah Montenegro, general counsel, didn't smile. She was flipping through a thick manila folder with the energy of someone looking for a ticking bomb. She paused on a page about halfway through and went still. Dead still. Trevor didn't notice. He was too busy waxing poetic about vertical growth via decentralized strategy, whatever that meant. Sarah finally raised a hand. "Sorry to interrupt," she said, "but a document came in over the weekend, time-stamped, notarized, and delivered by legal courier." Trevor waved a dismissive hand. "If it's from Patricia, I already told HR to ignore the noise." Sarah didn't blink. "It's not noise." The room shifted. You could feel the silence take shape. One of the external board members, a silver-haired woman with a pen perpetually tapping her notebook, glanced over. "Is this a legal issue?" Sarah adjusted her glasses. "Potentially. I'd like to call a recess to review the validity of a clause referenced in the document." "Clause?" Trevor scoffed. "Sarah, we eliminated most of the old paperwork during the last audit. I was told legal was modernizing everything." Sarah's voice was like ice water. "We eliminated the templates, not the governing documents, and this clause predates our digital archive." The board chair, a no-nonsense man named Douglas, leaned forward. "How old are we talking?" Sarah flipped the page around and tapped a signature. 2011, Robert Blackstone's original charter. This clause was reviewed and reaffirmed during our 2015 compliance cycle, signed by both Robert and the then-active board. Trevor let out a nervous laugh. "Okay, great, so what? Patricia found some dusty footnote and thinks she's staging a coup? Come on." No one laughed with him. Sarah closed the folder. "The document isn't just a complaint. It's a formal execution notice, triggered by her termination. It references Section 5.7 of the Operational Reversion Agreement." Douglas frowned. "Is that enforceable?" Sarah didn't answer right away. She just said, "I need 45 minutes in a quiet room." Trevor tried to lighten the mood. "Look, this is what happens when you keep dead weight around too long." She was always a bit dramatic. Again, silence. He looked around the room and added, "Seriously, you're not buying this, right?" One board member cleared their throat. "I think we'd all benefit from clarity. Let's reconvene after Sarah has had time to review." They stood. Chairs scraped, papers shuffled. Sarah moved quickly, folder in hand, her jaw set. Trevor leaned against the conference table, arms crossed. "This is exactly why I fired her," he muttered to no one in particular. "This dusty clause nonsense holding us back." But even as he said it, you could see the first flicker of doubt in his eyes, like he knew something was different this time. Like maybe, just maybe, Patricia hadn't left quietly because she was broken. Maybe she left quietly because she was ready. And the thing about clocks, they don't stop just because you're too arrogant to hear the ticking. The room was colder when they reconvened, not physically, just spiritually, like the air conditioning had sucked the confidence straight out of the atmosphere. Trevor came back from break 8 minutes late, iced coffee in hand, designer sunglasses still perched on his head like he'd just wandered in from a beachside startup summit. He was trying to project calm, but even from a distance, you could see the cracks forming beneath his veneer. Sarah Montenegro returned with 3 additional folders, one red, one black, one blue, and a look on her face like she'd just read the last page of a horror novel, one where the monster had been in the house the whole time. Douglas, the board chair, wasted no time. "Sarah, your findings." Sarah didn't sit. She remained standing, one hand on the black folder. The clause in question, Section 5.7 of the Operational Reversion Agreement, is valid. It was reaffirmed during the 2015 compliance cycle, certified by Robert Blackstone and 3 prior board members, 2 of whom are still serving. 2 of the silver hairs nodded slowly, clearly doing mental math on whether they'd signed something while half asleep at a retreat in Napa. Sarah continued. The clause was designed to prevent unilateral termination of key legacy personnel without full board review and severance compliance. If violated, it triggers a 72-hour reversion period. We're already 56 hours in. Trevor rolled his eyes and leaned back in his chair. Come on, that clause was always symbolic. You said so yourself years ago. It was like ceremonial, not enforceable. Sarah didn't blink. No, I said it was obscure, not symbolic, and it's enforceable. The severance terms were not met. The board was not notified in writing prior to termination. Founders Trust holds final authority in the event of a reversion. He sat up straighter. You're saying this thing. It's real. Sarah opened the black folder. Inside was a printed copy of the clause, signed by Robert and initialed by Patricia Hawthorne, dated, stamped, and notarized. It's not just real, Trevor. It's active. And if we don't find a way to reverse it within the next 16 hours, operational control of Blackstone Dynamics reverts to the appointee listed in the trust. Trevor scoffed. Robert hasn't updated that trust in years. You think he even remembers what he wrote down? Sarah's tone shifted, sharper now. That doesn't matter. The trust has legal standing, and unless we can produce an updated document, which I've confirmed we cannot, then we are bound by what was last filed. Trevor stood, pacing. No, this is insane. This is not how governance works. You can't just undo a CEO because someone found a dusty binder. Pen-tapping board member finally spoke. You fired someone with a direct connection to the founder and assumed the paperwork wouldn't bite back. That's not a dusty binder, Trevor. That's a loaded gun you handed her. Trevor turned on Sarah. Why didn't legal flag this sooner? Sarah was calm. Too calm. We did. I emailed you 2 weeks before her termination suggesting we conduct a legacy document audit. You replied with a thumbs-up emoji and laughing face. A beat of silence. Douglas exhaled, slow and deliberate. So what happens if the clock runs out? Sarah opened the red folder this time. Then the appointee listed in, the trust, assumes operational oversight of Blackstone Dynamics, interim or otherwise, until such time as the board votes to restructure the charter, and written override is required for any changes. Robert can't even hold a pen, Trevor muttered. Sarah's voice dropped. Then I suggest you use the time left to get creative. Trevor looked at the board, desperate now. We can contest it, file for emergency injunction, delay the clause. Sarah shook her head. You'd need standing, which you don't have. The clause explicitly removes power from the acting CEO in the event of a triggering event. Then I'll call Robert. He's under medical supervision, and you're not on the authorized contact list for trust matters. Patricia is. The room froze. Douglas turned slowly. Excuse me? Sarah nodded. She was granted contact privileges in 2022. She's the only non-family individual with access to the trust files. Trevor dropped into his chair like someone had cut the strings in his knees. You're telling me she's the one. Sarah didn't answer. She didn't need to because even Trevor could see it now. The one person he'd fired to prove a point had just become the point. And the worst part? There were still 16 hours left on the clock. By Tuesday morning, the walls were officially sweating. Trevor hadn't shaved. His once-styled hair stuck up in defiance, like even his follicles had turned on him. He paced the boardroom with the wild-eyed energy of someone trying to speed-run denial. The aura of startup swagger he wore like cologne had curdled into something desperate and thin. The board had reconvened early. Phones off, no assistance, no refreshments. Just 14 people in a room trying to determine whether the company was about to legally consume itself. Douglas opened the meeting without pleasantries. We've confirmed the clause is active. We've confirmed the trigger conditions were met. The trust is holding. There's no override from Robert on file. He looked at Sarah. Which brings us to the next step, Sarah said, her voice measured, clipped, lawyer clean. We need to confirm the identity of the named appointee. The Founders Trust designates a successor in the event of operational reversion. She placed a sealed manila envelope on the table, the kind that made paper feel like it could detonate. This file has not been opened since it was placed into trust custody in 2021, sealed in the presence of Robert Blackstone, 3 witnesses, and a notary public. There is one name inside, the appointed successor. Trevor let out a bitter laugh. This is a joke, right? You guys seriously want to roll company control based on an envelope? What is this, corporate roulette? No one answered. Sarah just stared at him, then slowly slid open the top of the envelope with a letter opener. She slid out a single cream sheet, unfolded it. Silence. She didn't read the name aloud, just paused, read it again, then turned the paper and passed it to Douglas. Douglas read it. His brow creased, not in confusion, but in recognition. He exhaled once, sharp, almost like a cough that caught on a memory. He passed the paper to the board member beside him, and on it went. One by one, the sheet made its quiet, devastating pilgrimage around the room. No reactions, no questions, just a shared understanding that something irreversible had just arrived. Trevor's voice cracked. Can someone just say it out loud? No one looked at him. He stood up. Say the damn name. Douglas finally turned to him, his face unreadable. Patricia M. Hawthorne. The words fell like a stone in a frozen lake. No splash, just a long, deep crack that kept spreading. Trevor actually stumbled back a step like the oxygen had been sucked out of his lungs. No, that's not possible. She was just operations. She was trusted, Sarah said quietly. He stared at her. You knew? I suspected, but I didn't know until now. Trevor ran a hand through his hair and let out a wild, dry laugh. You're telling me I fired the woman who's now legally in control of this company? Douglas nodded once. Yes, that's exactly what you did. He looked around the room like someone searching for escape hatches in drywall. We can override it, right? We can vote or something? No override without Robert's written consent, Sarah interrupted. And as you've been reminded, Patricia is the only one with trust access. If he's lucid, and if he chooses to write something different, it has to go through her. The clock on the wall ticked, loud, obnoxiously loud. There were 8 hours left before the 72-hour window closed. 8 hours before control transferred fully, formally, irrevocably. And the name written in Robert Blackstone's hand wasn't Trevor. It was Patricia. The legacy quicksand, the dead weight, the woman he thought he'd pushed off the chessboard, except she wasn't off the board. She was the board. By 10 o'clock a.m., Trevor had called me 9 times. The first voicemail was cocky. Hey, Patricia, look, we may have gotten off on the wrong foot. Let's talk, water under the bridge and all that. The second had a little more wobble. I think there's been a misunderstanding. Legal's kind of freaking out, and I'd love to clarify a few things if you're available. The third was just, please call me, please. I didn't listen to the rest. I let them pile up like trash on a curb the night before collection. No response, no forwarding, no signal. Trevor was starting to understand that silence is its own language, and in this case, it was screaming. Meanwhile, inside Blackstone HQ, the executive Slack channels had descended into the corporate version of a prison riot. Legal couldn't contain the leak. Someone, probably from the board, had whispered to someone at Tech Insider that a legacy clause was in play and that the CEO's authority was under legal review. By noon, PR had fielded 12 calls from technology journalists. The 13th came from a local station who caught wind of executive instability and sent a camera crew to the front steps, just in time to film a receptionist having a panic attack outside. Trevor tried spinning it. He drafted a statement about collaborative transitions and elevating legacy leadership to advisory roles. Legal wouldn't approve it, said it could be interpreted as confirmation of loss of control, so he sent out a company-wide email titled Leadership Update Clarifying the Path Forward. Inside, nothing but fluff. No mention of the clause, no mention of the founder's trust, just a bloated wall of buzzwords stapled to panic. Within minutes, a reply all came in from someone in accounting. Just 4 words. Is Patricia coming back? That email was forwarded to me by 7 different people, each with a different emoji reaction. Back inside the boardroom, Trevor was clawing at shadows. He pulled Sarah aside. There has to be a way to delay this. Revoke the clause, challenge the trust, something. Sarah didn't blink. We've reviewed every scenario. There's no legal footing. Your only option is Patricia. Then get her on the phone. She's not answering your calls. Then you call her. Sarah sighed. This is the reckoning, Trevor. You lit the match. You don't get to be surprised the house is on fire. By 4:00 p.m., a decision was made to inform Robert. His health had deteriorated sharply in the last few months. Limited speech, limited energy, but he was still lucid in short bursts, and most importantly, still legally competent. The trust executor flew out that morning. Trevor wasn't allowed in the room. Instead, Sarah went. She returned just after 6:00 p.m. The board was gathered, phones off, tension thick. Sarah placed her notes on the table and said quietly, "The founder has been informed of the clause and the pending reversion. He was shown the notarized document, the timestamps, and the trust directive." Douglas asked softly, "Did he understand?" Sarah nodded, fully. When shown the name of the appointee, he smiled. That word, smiled. Something snapped in Trevor. This is insane. You're letting some dinosaur from the analog age hit a reset button on $100 million company because of what? Loyalty? Sentimentality? I built this place up. Sarah turned slowly. No, Trevor. You inherited a seat at the table. She built the table. The board said nothing. There were 6 hours left. 6 hours until the clause locked into place and the reversion finalized. And Patricia, she hadn't said a word. Not a press release, not a phone call, not even a tweet. She didn't need to shout. She already owned the silence. It was 8:07 a.m. on Thursday when the board reconvened. Same room, same table. But this time, every person seated had the haunted posture of someone who knew a guillotine was hanging just above their heads. No one spoke. No one coughed. The legal team was already seated, documents lined up like tombstones. Douglas, at the head, tapped his pen against the edge of a leather portfolio. 4 soft ticks, then a pause, 4 more. The only rhythm in a room frozen in anticipation. At exactly 8:30 a.m., the courier arrived. He didn't knock. He was led in by security per protocol for time-sensitive legal deliveries. He walked the length of the table and handed a slim envelope to Douglas. He opened it without ceremony. Inside, a notarized cover letter, a 15-page activation packet, a flash drive containing the clause validation video and compliance audit trail. Sarah read the first few lines, then nodded once. It's done. Trevor, standing off to the side, half shadowed by the blinds, laughed nervously. So what now? She just waltzes in wearing a cape? As if on cue, the door opened. Patricia Hawthorne stepped in like she never left. No cape, no entourage. Just a charcoal suit sharp enough to cut glass, her old Blackstone badge clipped neatly to the lapel, and a single flash drive in her hand, the same one she carried back when she managed contracts tighter than a vault. She walked to the head of the table without a word. Every eye followed her, not because they were told to, but because gravity had returned to the room. Actual leadership had arrived. She didn't stop, didn't nod, didn't smirk. She sat. The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was reverent. The kind of silence you give to surgeons before the first cut, or judges before the final gavel. Douglas looked over the table. Patricia Hawthorne has assumed operational oversight under Section 5.7 of the Operational Reversion Agreement, effective immediately. He turned to Sarah. Legal concurrence? Sarah nodded. Clause executed. Chain of command has shifted. Douglas faced the room, motioned to acknowledge and enter this change into the governance record. All in favor. Hands rose one by one. All opposed? No one moved. Trevor cleared his throat. You can't be serious. You're just going to hand her the keys. This is my company. Patricia didn't even look at him. She opened her flash drive, connected it to the port in front of her, and waited as the screen came to life. A company-wide message populated the main dashboard. Title: Steady Hands, Clear Vision. Below it, a simple paragraph about continuity, integrity, respect for the values Blackstone was built on. It didn't need her name. Everyone already knew. Security entered the room without a word. Trevor took a step back. "Don't bother," he said, his voice brittle. "I'll go." He turned to Patricia. "You really think you won?" She finally looked up and smiled. Not smug, not cruel, just calm, absolute, like the sun rising exactly when it said it would. "Trevor," she said softly, "nepotism's cute until it hits the charter." He froze. She stood, walked to him, and handed him a single sheet of paper, his separation agreement, already prepared, already signed by the board. As he took it, dazed, she leaned in just slightly, just enough for him to hear. "Consider that your final lesson. You're the real champions of the office jungle. Thanks for watching. Smash that subscribe button, or the coffee machine might just forget your next brew.